Hi everybody, Steve Farmer here bringing you a recap of the Week 8 matchup between the Arizona Scorpions and the San Francisco Mechanics. If you recall last week, the Dreadnought sailed right past the floundering Scorpions out in the Pacific Division and handed them a loss 2.5 to 1.5. This week we see Arizona sailing by San Francisco and they don't even get a toehold on shore as San Francisco just pelts them with rocks from the cliffs up above. Not looking good for Arizona. This next week they'll go on and face Seattle, and mathematically it's possible for the Scorpions to fight for a playoff berth, but it's going to take some help. For example, they're going to have to score like 7, at least 6, to hopefully tie with a little bit of luck. 7 would give them a good chance. 8 probably would do it, even with 8 points out of the last 2 weeks, which is a tall order to fill. It would still need a little bit of help with San Francisco to beat LA, and then for Arizona to beat Seattle this week and to beat LA next week. 4-0, 4-0. Not an easy task. But that's the best chance to get into the playoffs. Anything less is going to really rely on the hope and prayers of the other two teams, Seattle and LA, doing something miraculously bad for Arizona to make it. I'd give Arizona about maybe a 10% or 11% shot at making the playoffs. So, with the result of this match, it was a sweep. San Francisco won it 4-0. A very rare occurrence in the chess league. But we're going to see some really bad play, and that's how they got there. First game we're going to look at is Vinay Bhatt playing white against Sahin Mohandesi for Arizona. And we join the position here after 27. Rook F1 has been played. Now I should mention that we have Sahin on board 1, and we have Pedrema Tufi on board 2. We have Angelina Belikovskaya on board 3, and Brian Hugh on board 4. So Arizona is fielding the B team right now. That's because Mac Molnar and Robbie Adamson both went off to play in the Spice Cup. By the way, Mac tied for third. Alex Ipatov and Caden Troff tied for first with 6.5 out of 9. But Mac tied for third through 8th with 6 out of 9. So, with my main players out of the picture, we're up to the B team here. Sahin played a King's Indian, which I'm a big fan of, as most of you know. But he played the move 11, knight f takes e5, which is not the right move. The logical continuation there is 11, d takes e5. I don't have the whole game score in the PGN viewer, I'm sorry. I just wanted to put up these positions here. I want to make a short article and a short video of these. Here's Sahin played bishop to d4. He should play knight to e7. He did not. But after this, we get a fairly level game here. White's a little bit better. But he played bishop to d4 here, and things started going downhill rather quickly for him after b5. I think white is just dominating this position and is on the verge of winning right at this point here. Now he took on e3, and perhaps he was thinking that white would have to take back. He doesn't. He didn't play this in the game. He played instead b takes c6. But after knight takes e3, then knight to d4, queen d2, knight f5, knight takes, queen takes. And white's a tiny bit better, but black's still in the game here. But as I said, he didn't play that. He played b takes c6. And now after the bishop drops back, rook b to e1, rook f e8, now f5, rook to e5, rook to f4, just dogpiling on that e-pawn. And black, short of time, makes another error and quickly finds himself in hot water. He plays b5. And after rook e takes e4, black ended up losing on time. A sample line from here might be to trade rooks, and then bishop to e5. However, after c takes b5, white is up 2 pawns and just has a firm grip all over black's position. It's an easy win for white, even if he didn't have to go for it because of the clock. Alright, that was a wonderful board 1 there. Let's go on to board 2. Okay, because these are B team players, I'm not covering the openings because none of them made any sense to me. None. When Sahin played knight f takes e5, I was like, okay, I don't understand what's going on now. And in this game, Pedram faced the Karo Khan by Daniel Naroditsky, who is playing black. Daniel's a sharp player, so what do you play against him? Well, you certainly don't play the fantasy variation, which is exactly what Pedram played. That's a flighty opening in my opinion. These off-the-wall openings, a lot of people play them. You know, a lot of players are just quirky. They like to play them. That's fine. If that's who you are, that defines what you're going to play. But in a team situation, I think you should play a more cautious approach. At least play to your own style. Now, I don't know if this is Pedram's style or not. If the fantasy variation is his style, I don't see how he got to be a FIDE master. But okay, it can happen. You play to your strengths, and if you can, play to your opponent's weaknesses. Now, for example, I play the Goring Gambit from time to time, but I'm not going to play something like that in a team tournament. I'll do it in an over-the-board tournament for myself. For example, I used it once in the 2009 New Mexico Championship, and it ended up helping me to tie for first in that tournament. But that's on me. That's not on anybody else. If I was to lose that game, nobody else is in trouble from it. So yeah, I think that I think you have to have a more cautious approach. Now, it seems that Pedram's danger antenna was not up in the air sniffing for danger. It seems like this is a simple position, but it is not. Black has got a very good position here, and I think that he should have been aware of that. I think the move that he should play here would be knight g to e2. And even here, he's in a bit of trouble after e4, queen to g3, bishop d6, queen e3, and rook e8. Black is just super solid here. No problems for black whatsoever. More space, a lot more mobility for his pieces. Black's clearly better. But at least, after knight ge2, white is not getting rolled off the board. Instead, Pedram decides to castle here. The logical move here is knight c5. Very simple to see. But you know what? It's really hard for white to adequately meet this move. For example, where does the queen go? If she goes to e3, we got knight to g4, queen to g3. Now we can take here, queen takes, and then knight to e4. This is looking really good for black. If queen to e2, then we got bishop g4, knight f3, now e4, and life sucks for white. And if queen to g3, knight c to e4, trade knights, queen to e1, knight takes d2, and rook takes d2. And black could pick up the exchange right away here and be much better, but bishop f5 is what I call a punisher move. The idea of a punisher move is your opponent's calculating something and he's saying, I'm going into a worse position, okay, I'll live with that. But look for something a little bit beyond what he's been looking for. Bishop takes d2 is the sort of move that I'm sure white would be looking at in this type of position. At least that's what I would be thinking. But now bishop f5 is just adding more fuel to the fire. And the point here is that c3 is not really playable. He has to try knight to e2, but after bishop takes c2, king takes c2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, queen to c5, black is going to get that piece back with a better position and a winning position. And on c3, it looks like it just blocks the bishop, but black just takes it. If he plays pawn takes bishop, then queen to b1 is mate, so he has to try like knight to e2. And this is just winning for black as well. So after knight to c5, Pedram looked at all those options and didn't like any of them, and he played queen to f1. And it's really probably the best shot in this position. Bishop takes c3 was played. Bishop takes c3. Knight to a4 is a good move, very logical, and has the benefit of forcing white to either retreat the bishop or find some way to defend the bishop on c3. Now, if knight to e2, then bishop to g4 is pinning that knight, and white's still faced with those problems. Oh, actually, he can't retreat the bishop, because queen takes b2 is the threat. I'm sorry. So, rook to d3 was played. Knight to e2 is a little better, but he's still in trouble after that, as we saw. Knight takes c3, rook takes c3. Now, don't let the optics of this position fool you. It looks like white's got out of the mess. Really, he has only just stepped in it. Knight to e4. Again, not a difficult move to find for Daniel, but the real question is, what is white going to do with the rook? There's the threat of knight coming to f2, winning the rook on h1, and the threat of just taking the rook right away. So, it's your chance to choose what to do here. If you want him to play the rook to b3, text stupid bishop b3. If you want the rook to go to f3, text stupid bishop f3. If you want to see a clip from the rock, paper, scissors championship, text stupid bishop rock. You have selected rock. Okay, well, the truth of the matter here is queen to e1 is probably the best move here, just giving up the exchange. But even here, black is just winning. But it's the best shot. If rook to d3, then we get knight f2, as mentioned before. If rook to e3, well, you just take the rook. If queen to d3, knight f2, move the queen and take the rook. And on any other rook move, just as in the game, such as rook to b3, or if rook to f3, or if rook to g3, it's all the same answer. And it's a very simple move for black. If you were playing black, what would you do here? Sure, you don't need much time to figure this out. I don't know if Pedram saw this or if he was just committing harikari. He played rook to b3, and after queen to h6, he thought about it for a moment. Well, actually, he thought about it for a couple moments and then resigned. So it leads me to think that he probably did not see this. So resigns is the right move here, because if king to b1, and we got knight to d2, check, king to a1, and we pick up the queen for free. And of course, if he goes to d1 here, then queen to d2 is checkmate. So resigns is probably appropriate. Actually, king to d1 would probably be the most fitting thing to do here. And here we are at move 16. White lost. Amazing. Let's see if we can do any better on board 3. Okay, here we are at move 19, and this came from a King's Gambit. Credit David Pruss, playing white, for throwing out the King's Gambit. Angelina Belikovskaya is playing black, and she has just jettisoned her b-pawn a couple moves ago to try and get some play. But look at these pawns, they're just absolutely sick. White dominates on both sides of the boards with his pawn structures there, and he is going to exhibit some nice skill in advancing the queenside pawns. So with that fear in mind, Angelina played a5, thinking that she could slow down the advance of the pawns. But David unleashes a very nice move here. He could trade rooks and then play the move he plays, but he plays b4 right away, which is very nice. And this move can be fully appreciated if she were to take on b4 right away. Then we get this trade. We start marching the pawn up, come up here. The knight can come back, but after a7, king e7 to help guard the a8 square, and bishop c6. White just dominates the board. The bishop on that h1 a8 diagonal is keeping an eye on the pawn on g2, and always keeping an eye on the square on a8, so that if anything goes there, white will be able to trade and win the pawn ending pretty easily. Just total domination by white. Even though the material's equal, black is lost. Angelina tries to take a different tack to this. She realizes that that's not a very nice line, so she plays rook to b8 here. After bishop c6, a b4, a5, knight c4, similar to what we looked at, a6. Now she realizes it's too little too late, and she tries some trickiness here, but it just comes up short. a7, b2 check, king over, king to g7, just giving up the rook, and now rook to b6, hitting the bishop, bishop to d5, rook to a6, picks off the knight, but gives up the rook, so it's a win of an exchange and a pawn. And black is down a full piece, yet she kept playing on to move 58. She played all the way on to mate. Many in the chat room thought this was poor form or bad sportsmanship. To Angelina's credit, she didn't take much time on any of her moves. It was pretty much like a stage of decompression or something. I think it would have been more sporting to resign at this point, but I'm not going to fault her for playing on. You know, especially if you're sitting there and you're just playing the moves just to get the game over with. All right, let's see how young Brian can do on board 4. Now Brian has white and he's playing Bannock, who now plays the move knight to c7. Now I don't fully understand Brian's opening choices these days, but often that has a lot to do with who your coach is. When I met Brian several years ago, we had a game where he played a Najdorf as black against me, and it's a sharp tactical line. Yes, he did get lost in the complications, and I ended up winning the game because of that, but skill and tactics comes with time and experience. So I thought that Brian was going to stay along those paths, but now he's looking for these positional openings, and we have kind of a strange Catalan type position here. Now, a few years ago I studied the Catalan in and out as white because I like to have some surprise weapons with white pieces from time to time. But I couldn't make heads or tails of what he was trying to do in this opening. I see no plan for white. I only see reactionary ideas for white. He can only react to what black is doing. So in those terms, I think the opening has not been much of a success for Brian. Now here Brian plays e4. It allows black to start crashing through. He should have played knight takes c4. Now, this is not regaining the pawn because black has a nice maneuver, and this is the reason why black brought the knight back to c7. It's to play knight to b5. Now queen to b4, knight takes d4. And after bishop to e5, knight takes e2, king to h1. It's 2 pawns down right now, but black has to find absolutely the correct move here. Otherwise, the advantage goes over to white. However, that correct move is enough to keep the advantage in black's court, and that's c5. After queen to b7, he can bring the knight back, and black's a bit better here. However, white does have some play in this position as well. Just real quick here, if you thought you could take the knight on c4, the queen's hanging on d8, so just remember that. Yeah, and after knight to d4, blocking the attack on the queen, black's just a tiny bit better. However, that was not played in the game. e4 was played, and it's kind of a thematic idea. However, it doesn't work here. After knight to b5, queen to b4. Okay, where does the queen go? That's the big question here. If she goes to e3, then there's f6. The knight has to drop back, and then g5 is trapping the bishop, winning material. Queen to d2 just allows knight takes d4, queen takes, rook takes d4. a3 is kind of a nice move here, because if he takes on a3, he's putting both rooks on that diagonal of the black bishop. And then after rook to b1 and g5, the defender of the knight on e5 is forced away. Black wins material. And lastly, if queen to f3, then f6 is just going to win material. Like so. 2 pawns up, dominating position. And white's forces are really tangled up on the king side. This is winning for black. So Brian tries to make the best of it with queen to b4, but after knight takes d4, queen takes b7, now queen to a5, rook takes d4, bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, queen takes e5. You know, a nice game by Bannock, I have to say. You know, technically white is only down a pawn, but in effect he's like a piece down. As the bishop on g2, it's not making itself felt. That plus the open lines on the queen side, things are really nice for black. You could almost say black is like playing a piece up, at least for the moment. Rook a d1 was played, queen to c5, queen to c7, bishop to g4, hitting the rook, moves up. But he didn't see that this loses material. You know, his alternative, I guess, is to just give up the exchange, try and activate the bishop with bishop f1 or something. But that's admitting defeat. And I think Brian just did not see this next move, rook to a7, and this wins material. Now, I really wasn't paying attention to this game. I just heard that he had lost. I'd been so wrapped up in Mike and Craig's coverage in the commentary on the main page, the chess.com/TV. It was the best night those guys have had all season long. They were having fun. They were picking on the audience. They were picking on the games, picking on each other. and it was a lot of fun. It was, guys, that was a great broadcast. Thank you very much. But the problem for Brian here, when I went back to look at it, is that he's losing material. There's really only one square for the queen, right? Yeah, that's pretty much easy to see. Now e5 is forking the queen and the rook. Now if queen to g5, then either f6 or h6 is going to end up winning the rook on d4. Okay, that's it. Arizona goes down 4-0. What a major setback. There are 2 more matches left in the regular season. Arizona's going to Seattle to take on the Sluggers, and then they go down to LA and take them on. And like I said, they have to win both those matches by a pretty huge margin. You know, I'd say at least 3-1 in both of them. 3.5 to 1/2 in both of them would be very good. Winning all 8 games would be optimal. That'll give them the best chance to make it to the playoffs. But if they go 7-1, they're cutting a pretty thin line there. They might be able to make it. 6-2, you know, it may come down to a tie where they're looking at the total game scores. I don't know what the secondary tie breaks are, but things are really looking difficult for the Arizona Scorpions. Like I said, I give them a 10 or 11% chance of making the playoffs. And I think a lot of it is going to come down to how they handle Seattle this next matchup. The Seattle match is going to be on Tuesday, October 22nd at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If Arizona can clean their clocks, and it's going to take a huge effort of all the players, but we do have a good lineup, and they are all capable of winning all their games from what I've seen from the pairings. We're going to have Mac Molnar playing white against Timur Gariev. Now, Gariev is a very strong player. He's rated 2768, and he's playing the black pieces. I think this gives Mac a good chance to win, because Gariev has not been playing his best, at least not from what I can see. And if he has another week like that, yeah, Mac could definitely win that game. Now next we have Emil Anka playing white against Levan Altunian. It's going to be a tough road to hoe for Lev having the black pieces in this instance, but I think Lev is quite capable. He's been the player of the year for the Scorpions, and I look for him to be able to do some magic here for us. Then we have Robbie Adamson playing white on board 3 against Tian Sang. And Robbie has missed chances in each of the games he's played this season so far. I don't think he's going to miss the chances here. He knows it's do or die. I think he's going to be totally dedicated minute by minute on this game coming up. And then on board 4, we're going to have Megan Lee for Seattle taking on Amanda Mateer. But their ratings are pretty close. So it's a toss-up here. But I'm going to be rooting for Amanda, obviously. It's everything to gain from playing for a win and nothing to lose by trying too hard. So when you're facing an opponent in that kind of situation, it can be really hard to try and get a draw if that's what you're aiming for. So we'll see what happens. Arizona's got a long road to hoe here. It's possible. But like I said, I'm not giving the predictions too high. 10-11%, somewhere around there. I hope you will all tune in and cheer for the Scorpions in these last remaining 2 matchups. Thanks for watching, and we'll see y'all next week. Until next time, good luck.